I pulled into the gravel driveway just as the sun dipped behind the tree line, painting the lake in pale gold. My trunk was full: groceries, fresh linens, a new book I'd been saving for weeks. I'd been looking forward to this weekend for months. No phone calls, no obligations, just the sound of water and quiet. But even before I turned off the engine, something felt wrong. The curtains in the front window were open. Light spilled out from every corner of the house, kitchen, hallway, even the porch lamps I never left on. As I stepped out, music hit me. Loud, bass-heavy. Not mine. Not meant for this place. 3 unfamiliar cars were parked at an angle like someone owned the place. I walked up slowly, still clutching the grocery bags. The front door was ajar, laughter leaking through the cracks. I knocked twice. Nothing. I pushed the door open. The smell of perfume and something overly sweet filled the air. The living room was packed. A dozen people laughing, drinking heels on my wood floors. My couch was covered in coats. My dining table set for 10. Tara stood by the kitchen island in one of her tight, shoulderless dresses, swirling a wine glass. Her parents were on the couch. I didn't recognize the others, probably cousins or coworkers or whoever she deemed important this week. Someone turned down the music, and then she saw me. Her eyes narrowed as if I were a roach scuttling across her party. "What is this stupid Leech doing here?" she snapped. "Get out." I looked at Jacob. He stood beside her, arms crossed, not saying a word. He didn't move. I didn't ask questions. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll leave." I turned and walked out, the groceries still in my arms, the keys still in my pocket. As I closed the door behind me, I heard her laughing. My hand gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual as I backed out of the driveway, the porch light behind me still burning, unwelcome and bright. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. I set the grocery bags on the counter and sank into the old armchair near the window, the one my mother called the fainting chair, though no one had ever fainted in it. It faced nothing in particular, just the outline of the neighboring building and the reflection of my own window in the dark. The groceries were still cold. I'd picked things I loved: sharp cheese, fresh herbs, a small loaf of seeded bread. I opened the wine, the one I was saving for that porch evening by the lake, and poured a glass. I took a sip. It didn't taste like anything. Tara's voice rang in my ears, louder now, without the music to drown it out. "What is this stupid Leech doing here?" The way her lip curled when she said it. The smugness behind it. But what stayed with me more was Jacob's silence. No protest. Not even a flinch. He used to call me every Saturday. Used to lean his head on my shoulder while I cooked. I remembered the night he came to me, shy and worried, asking if I'd help with a down payment on a car so he could drive to his new job. I co-signed without thinking. I wanted him to move forward. Then it was the wedding venue. They'd fallen in love with one near the state park. He didn't have the savings, so I wrote the check. Then came the job loss. 3 months of rent turned into 6, then 10, then a year. I kept saying yes, telling myself it was temporary, that family meant helping when things got hard. And still, somehow, I became the burden. The outsider. The lake house wasn't for parties. It was for breathing. After 4 decades of noise, city council meetings, planning budgets, and last-minute calls from contractors, it was supposed to be mine. I pulled a blanket over my lap and leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Somewhere between the cracks, the answer was already forming. I just had to start writing it down. I found the yellow legal pad I used to keep in my desk drawer back when I was still working. The pages were thin and slightly curled, but the lines were clean, steady. I uncapped a pen and started to write. $16,000. Student loans. I remember the phone call. Jacob was embarrassed, said he didn't want to start his marriage in debt. I paid it off in 2 installments, no hesitation. $24,000. Wedding. The venue, the caterer, the flowers. Tara wanted a custom archway and floating lanterns. Jacob promised they'd pay me back after the honeymoon. That never happened. $12,600. 1 year's rent. He lost his job the same month their lease was renewed. Said it would be just a few months. I kept transferring the money, telling myself it was temporary. It never was. $7,400, insurance and repairs. The old sedan I helped him buy kept breaking down. He couldn't afford new tires. Then the windshield cracked. I covered it again and again. I added up the numbers line by line. Over $60,000 in 5 years. More than I'd ever spent on myself in the same span. Then I turned the page and wrote one word, house. The lake house. Purchased with my name, my credit, my savings. No one else's. I saw the front porch in my mind, saw Tara. Standing there, wine glass in hand, calling me a leech. I saw Jacob standing beside her, letting it happen. I turned back to the first page of the pad. Circled the total. Drew a box around it. Then I flipped to a clean sheet and began listing next steps. My hands moved quickly. Columns. Contacts. Timelines. I hadn't drafted a logistics matrix in years, but my body remembered. When I finished, I took a breath and closed the notebook. Tomorrow I'd call Harold. He'd handled my deed, my retirement paperwork. He would know where to begin. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink. That house had always been mine. Now it was time to make sure no one could ever pretend otherwise. Harold greeted me with the same calm tone he'd used when he handled my retirement years ago. His office hadn't changed, same neat rows of case folders, same smell of stale coffee and printer ink. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "It's been a while, Lorraine. What brings you in?" I laid the folder on the table. Inside were copies of the house deed, bank transfers, and an itemized list of everything I'd covered for Jacob and Tara. "I need to make sure my property is still mine," I said, "and that no one else has a claim to it." He took his time flipping through the papers. "You're the sole owner," he said finally. "The deed is clear. They have no legal right to occupy or use it without your consent." I nodded, but didn't feel relieved. Then why are there tax forms listing it as their secondary residence that made him look up? "Who filed those?" "My son," I said quietly, without telling me. He leaned back, eyebrows drawn. "That's serious, Lorraine. It's misrepresentation. If the IRS catches it, it could come back on you unless we correct it immediately." The words sank in like cold water. Jacob had crossed lines I hadn't even known existed. I stared at the folder, at my own signature, printed neatly across every page, the only thing keeping my name tethered to what was mine. "What do I do?" I asked. Harold pulled a form from his drawer and slid it across the desk. "You sign this, revokes all informal permissions, and establishes sole control. I'll have a copy sent to the county clerk. You should also change the locks." I signed without hesitation. When I got home, I opened my banking app. The monthly rent transfer, the car payment canceled. Every automatic withdrawal connected to their names erased with a single tap. My finger hovered over the screen for a long moment before I pressed confirm. The silence afterward felt heavier than I expected, but it was clean, like the sound of a door closing for the last time. He showed up right on time, Tuesday at 9. A quiet man in his 50s, gray at the temple sleeves rolled to his elbows. He didn't ask questions, just nodded when I showed him the front and back doors. I stood off to the side as he worked, hands folded, saying nothing. The clink of tools and low hum of the drill were the only sounds in the house. No music, no voices. Just metal being undone and replaced. When he finished, he handed me 2 identical brass keys in a small envelope. "You'll want to keep those safe," he said. I nodded, folding the envelope in half and sliding it into my coat pocket. After he left, I stood on the porch a while longer, watching the lake. It looked still too still, like it was holding its breath with me. I unpacked the small, motion-activated camera I'd ordered online and screwed it into the beam just above the door. It blinked once, then lit up, ready to record. Inside, the silence followed me from room to room. In the kitchen, the counter had been wiped, probably not by Tara, I thought, but there was still a faint stickiness near the sink. I wiped it again, slower this time. The fridge held half a bottle of cheap rosé and 2 plastic containers of takeout. I dumped both. Upstairs, the bedroom window was still open. The breeze had blown the curtain halfway across the bed. I closed the window, rehooked the latch, and smoothed the fabric down, like nothing had happened. That's when I saw the wine glass. It was perched on the edge of my dresser, a faint ring of red lipstick around the rim. I picked it up carefully, held it in my hand for a moment, then walked to the kitchen and dropped it into the trash without a sound. I didn't speak the whole time I was there, didn't play music, didn't turn on the TV. I just made a cup of tea, sat on the porch, and watched the sky darken. The first call came 3 days later. "Hey, Mom? Just checking in. The rent didn't go through. Maybe a bank error. Let me know." I put the phone down and went back to rinsing the teacup. The second voicemail was less casual. Tara's car payment bounced. She's really upset. "Are you okay? Can you call me?" I didn't. The texts came next. "Hey, did something happen? Can we talk? You're not answering. I'm getting worried. This isn't like you, Mom. You're acting like a stranger." Each one landed like a pebble in a still pond. Tiny ripples, but not enough to move anything that mattered. I read them all, then pressed save and filed them into a folder marked, simply, Jacob. Then came the emails. Long paragraphs this time. Appeals layered in confusion and guilt. Phrases like, "After everything we've been through and we thought we could count on you." I didn't reply. I didn't even scroll to the bottom. By the end of the week, the tone had shifted. They stopped asking what was wrong and started asking why I was doing this to them. I was finishing a crossword when the landline rang. I almost didn't pick up, but the name caught me. Marjorie Halbrook, Tara's mother. "Lorraine," she said, her voice tight. "I just spoke with Jacob. He's distraught." "What's going on? You're breaking the family apart." I let the silence stretch for a moment. Then I answered, calm and even. "You don't know the whole story." She inhaled sharply, like she might say more, but I'd already pressed end. I muted my phone and went back to my crossword. That evening, I took a walk around the lake. The air smelled different without the party debris, cleaner, quieter. Clara arrived just before 6, carrying a paper bag with a loaf of bread and a bottle of dry red wine. We used to work together back in the city, but she'd retired 2 years before me. She was the only one I invited these days, the only one who never asked for more than I offered. I'd made a simple stew, enough for 2. We ate at the small kitchen table, the windows cracked open to let in the breeze. For a while, we talked about old co-workers, about the scaffolding scandal at City Hall, about how everything in the city had gotten noisier since we left. Then she set her glass down and said, "Jacob's been calling me." I didn't flinch, and I didn't answer. "I figured if you weren't, you had your reasons." She paused, then looked at me directly. "I didn't realize how much you carried Lorraine." I ran my finger around the rim of my bowl. "I let them take too much," I said. She nodded, and that was all we needed to say on the matter. After dinner, I opened the closet in the hallway and pulled out the old photo album, the thick blue one with gold stitching down the spine. We sat on the couch, flipping through pages. There he was, 7 years old, holding a fishing rod twice his height. Another picture me on the ladder, Jacob on the ground, handing me nails as we built the porch railing together. His hands were still small in that photo, his grin wide and certain. "That boy," I said, voice quiet. Never imagined calling his mother a burden. Clara didn't speak. She just rested her hand over mine. I tore out 2 photos, one of the porch, one of us by the fire pit, and set them aside. The rest I slid back into the album. closed it, wrapped it in twine, and placed it in a box I taped shut. I carried the box to the closet and set it behind the vacuum. Not gone, but not visible either. The keys clicked differently this time. Not louder, not softer, just sure. They turned without resistance, without the echo of borrowed footsteps behind them. I stepped into the lake house alone and let the door close behind me with a quiet thud. I brought only what I wanted. A fresh set of teacups, white with green trim, my sketch pad and pencils. A small speaker loaded with the kind of music I used to play on Sunday mornings, soft jazz nothing anyone could dance to. Just enough to fill the corners. The rooms smelled like pine and clean air again. I opened the windows, not because I had to, but because I wanted the breeze. That's when I saw it on the sofa, tucked between two throw blankets, a pillow embroidered with Tara's initials. Too perfect, too glossy wrong for this place. I picked it up, like it was something expired, and dropped it into the donation bin I kept in the hall closet. It didn't deserve a second thought. I wiped down the counters, lit the cinnamon candle I'd forgotten in the cabinet, and boiled water for tea. Later, wrapped in a blanket, I sat by the lake just as the last bit of sun slipped beneath the horizon. The sky didn't perform. It simply dimmed, slowly, gently. The air had that crisp stillness again, the kind I hadn't felt since before they started showing up unannounced. No voices, no music that wasn't mine, no strangers using my cups or laughing in rooms they hadn't built, just me. I sketched the tree line for the third time, not to capture it, but to steady my hand. The wind moved across the surface of the water, lifting strands of my hair like it remembered me. I stayed out until the chill reached my fingertips, then stood, folded the blanket, and brought everything inside. The house settled as I moved through it, like it was adjusting to being mine again. He came by without calling. I saw his reflection in the peephole. First shoulders, slumped eyes hollow, no ring on his finger. For a moment, I almost didn't open the door. But old habits die harder than pride. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was thin. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He stood in the entryway like a guest looking at everything but me. "She left," he finally said. "Tara. She said I was worthless now." I didn't say I was surprised. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was trying to find somewhere to put his shame. He sat at the table where we used to eat together, back when life was simple. "She used me," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Used you. All that money, the house, everything. I thought I was helping her, but I was just—" He trailed off. I let her do it. The silence stretched. He stared at the grain of the table as if it might answer for him. "I'm sorry," he said then so quietly I almost missed it. I wanted to tell him it was too late, that sorry doesn't fix what's been spent or what's been said, but I also knew he didn't need to be punished anymore. He was already sitting in the wreckage of his own choices. "I know you are," I said. "But you'll need to rebuild without me funding it." He nodded. "I know." I stood, opened the cupboard, and packed a small grocery bag, some soup I'd made that morning, a loaf of bread, a jar of jam. I handed it to him without ceremony. "Thanks," he murmured. He lingered by the door for a moment, waiting for something more that didn't come. When the latch clicked behind him, the apartment felt heavier for a moment, then still. I sat back down, the warmth from his teacup still on the table. Outside, the wind started to shift, carrying the smell of rain. I looked toward the window, where the reflection of my lake house key hung on its hook, waiting. The months passed slowly, like fog lifting. My savings crept back up a few hundred at a time. There were no more rent drafts, no surprise overdrafts, no calls asking for a little help. Just deposits, just quiet. I started clearing things out. The Ottoman Tara had insisted on the bar cart. Jacob once said, "Made us look more modern." All of it went to a local shelter. The rooms looked emptier after, but somehow more complete. They looked like me again. I met with Harold one more time and wrote a new will. Clean, simple, protected. The lake house would stay in my name until I no longer needed it, and after that, it would go to a foundation that supported women writers. A quiet place for stories to start. That felt right. I began volunteering twice a week at the town library, mostly shelving books or helping with community classes. No one there asked about Jacob or Tara. They just handed me paperbacks and smiled when I returned them on time. Jacob sent a text every so often. A picture of the office at his new job, a pot of stew he'd tried making from scratch. I didn't always reply. When I did, it was short, kind, distant, not cold but not open. He never asked for anything and I never offered. It was the first real boundary we'd ever had. Tonight, I made myself coffee and sat in the chair by the lake-facing window. The same chair I'd thought about replacing for years but never could. The wood creaked in that comforting way it always had. The porch light glowed soft and amber outside, catching the outline of the water through the glass. I watched until the coffee cooled. The house didn't creak the way it used to. It didn't feel borrowed anymore. It didn't feel invaded. I stood, rinsed the mug, and turned off the light. The lock clicked shut behind me, firm and final. Only my hand had the key.